Hello, everyone. Today we will go over a popular yet widely misunderstood topic astrology. We're going to explore what it is not, as well as, most importantly, the fundamental mechanism behind the entire practice. So, let's dive right in. The best way to understand the core principle of astrology is to actually use a separate example. Picture this it's a Friday night in the middle of a harsh Alaskan winter. You hear a news report about a DUI accident on a local road. Whether you are surprised to hear this news or not depends entirely on your perspective. However, once we dissect the cycles at play, you will see as to how this event was likely to occur. Let's start off with the physical environment. A winter night in the northern place means that not only is it dark, but the roads are likely covered in snow and ice, making for inherently dangerous driving conditions. Additionally, since it's freezing cold out, almost everyone is going to be traveling by car, increasing the number of vehicles on these roads. Then you have the social cycle. A Friday night, the work week is over, and many people are going out for a drink to unwind. Some of these people will make the wrong decision and get behind the wheel when they shouldn't have. And so the puzzle pieces start to assemble. Dangerous road conditions colliding with a higher likelihood of inebriated drivers. A textbook recipe for an accident. Now, you're not surprised to hear this news. By assessing different cycles physical, social, environmental you're able to piece together a conclusion about a likely event to unfold. However, even if it is a likely event to happen under these conditions, is it guaranteed to happen every single Friday night in Alaska? Of course not. There are countless other cycles at play, most of them down to the choices of individuals. As human beings, we simply cannot keep track of every single one of these cycles. However, we can keep track of the major ones, allowing us to paint a landscape of possibility. Even if the predicted event doesn't happen with a guaranteed rate, are you wrong for making this assessment and prediction? No. The combination of these cycles, be it statistical, environmental, social, physical, or any other type, genuinely does open up the potential for this scenario. It is a completely valid interpretation of the conditions. Furthermore, even if the predicted event, such as a DUI, doesn't actually happen, are you wrong for being more cautious if you have to drive in this environment? Absolutely not. Even if no accident occurs on your route, you're still better off being more aware and careful. This scenario is just one of many ways to interpret one pattern. Let's start over with the exact same premise Friday night, Alaskan winter. What else is likely? Alaska is vast, remote, and cold, which means that life is inherently more focused on indoor living. So, another highly likely scenario is that a family gathering happens at somebody's house and everybody stays completely warm and completely safe. Another possible scenario is that some remote areas will experience power outages due to the harsh climate, meaning that everyone is going to stay at home for a different reason, and the roads will largely be kept empty. So we have the same initial premise, Alaskan winter, Friday night, yet we've come up with very different potential outcomes. None of them are wrong, none of them are guaranteed to happen, yet all are very possible events that don't exclude each other. In fact, they could all be happening at once, in different contexts. This example is an exercise of pattern recognition. We're assessing how different overlapping cycles combine to create a landscape of potential events. They don't dictate a specific event, but they define the kinds of events that are more likely to occur. Obviously, there's nuance to this, so let's use a different example. First off, there's context. Let's imagine you pick up your phone and you see that it's 5 p.m. on a Thursday. If you live and work in a city, you know there's going to be traffic. It's rush hour, an instant recognition of a pattern. However, this interpretation is not universal. It absolutely depends on where you are. If you're on a remote mountain hike, the pattern of 5 p.m. on a Thursday has zero correlation with traffic for you. The interpretation doesn't apply in your context. That doesn't mean the interpretation is wrong. It's very real for millions of people in the city. This interpretation will also become very real for you once you drive back into the town. So, the context within which a pattern occurs matters greatly. Then there's perspective. What do you consider to be heavy traffic? If you're from a small town, a 10-minute delay may feel like a major traffic jam. But if you're from New York City or Los Angeles, for example, you might not even notice it. The objective event, a certain number of cars on a road, is experienced entirely differently based on who you are. It's also extremely important to consider the following. When you picked up your phone and looked at the time and saw that it was 5 p.m., does the phone make it 5 p.m.? Does the phone physically reshape the fabric of space to create traffic and place cars on your road? No, of course not. The phone is simply an indicator. It is a tracker of a specific cycle and it shows you the current position along it. The interpretation is then done by you, depending on the context and perspective. So, let's summarize. Recognizing patterns allows you to interpret a range of potential outcomes. These interpretations are not guarantees, and their relevance depends entirely on your context and your perspective. Additionally, you don't have to track physical events to make these conclusions. You can track indicators, such as the time on your phone, and then interpret the pattern. You could call it a scaffold. It is a way to model behavior and potential in broad terms. It's not a guarantee of specific outcomes, but it is a wildly useful tool for navigation. The skill of pattern recognition is arguably one of the most important reasons humanity dominates this planet. It's how we learn to predict the changing of seasons, the migration of animals, the growth of crops, social behaviors, among other things. It's a fundamental skill to our survival and intelligence. And this same principle is the core mechanism of astrology. Now's a great time to define what astrology even is. Astrology is the study of celestial patterns and their correlations with events. The word correlation is extremely important here because this is where most of the misunderstanding happens. The argument is not that the planet Jupiter, or any other planet for that matter, is beaming down a personality ray that causes you to be optimistic or morose. That is a simplistic caricature. The key is to think of the planets and other celestial objects not as causal forces, but as the hands on a vast clock, indicating transition through cycles. The reason that astrology is a prominent example of such a tracking system is because for all of human history, the movements of the planets and stars have been the most consistent, predictable, and enduring cycles we could possibly observe. They are our reliable cosmic clockwork against which we can measure time. We know where the planets are, where they were, where they will be, and we have known this for thousands of years. Pair this with human curiosity, and naturally a system emerges. It's also important to note that astrology is not unique. It is simply a way to track a pattern, but nowhere near the only one. We track patterns as human beings every day, and we use different tools for different contexts. Astrology is just one additional lens. Furthermore, coming back to the example of checking the time on your phone, which doesn't cause rush hour traffic, it simply reliably indicates the time within which traffic happens. Astrology works in the same way. The clock is a marker. The interpretations that comes from these markers, such as events in human behavior, depend on your context and perspective. Each celestial object tracked, in turn, becomes a hand of a cosmic clock. Over millennia, across countless civilizations, observers began to notice that specific clock hands represented specific cycles and themes. These cycles and themes could in turn be used to overlay over earthly events, creating a system of tracking. An important note is that astrology does not propose a scientific mechanism as to why these correlations exist, only that they do exist. It is a system built on empirical observation of patterns, not on a causal theory that we can yet explain with, say, physics or chemistry. So, at its heart, Astrology is a complex time tracking system. It then correlates cosmic time patterns to the patterns of life and events here on Earth. The practice of astrology is found in nearly every civilization. Needless to say, it has had a profound impact on humanity as a whole. The desire to understand this cosmic clockwork led directly to the development of timekeeping itself, calendars, agriculture, navigation, philosophy, cultural practice, among many other things. The very foundations of astronomy and modern science were built by practicing astrologers, Galileo being a prime example. It's crucial to restate that astrology is not unique in this function of pattern recognition. It is simply a way, but not the way. We all have a system of assessing patterns, actually. We all have our own databases of correlations and patterns that we use to navigate life. All of us, without exception. We also use different kinds for different purposes. A stock market analyst uses economic patterns. A doctor uses biological patterns. These are all specified systems. Astrology differs from these systems in the sense that it is applicable to any context, though with varying degrees of success, of course. It is both a great strength and immense challenge of astrology. Of course, we can't talk about astrology without addressing the massive stigma surrounding it, and this is where we need to have a very clear and nuanced discussion about science, experimentation, and humanity in general. Before I go any further, I want to be perfectly clear. If you are anti science, anti vax, anti academia, anti whatever else of that sort, this is not the place for you. This conversation is coming from a place of deep respect for the scientific method, which has yielded us some of humanity's greatest achievements. Coming as a surprise to absolutely no one, astrology is considered a pseudoscience, which is defined as statements, beliefs, or practices that claim to be both scientific and factual, but are incompatible with the scientific method. By that definition, astrology is a textbook example. However, as usual, the truth is a bit deeper. Astrology isn't really a pseudoscience because astrology isn't even a science in the first place. Astrology is a clock. The same way you check the time on your phone and make traffic assumptions is not a scientifically rigorous statement. It is a personal analysis of patterns depending on context and perspective. The patterns are there and they are objective, but the meaning itself and subsequent action is derived in a way that is unique. Just off of this alone, astrology cannot be a science. It does not provide universal formulas for gravity. It is simply a way to observe a pattern. That in itself contains scientific elements, but that's not enough. Let's come back to the example of a winter in Alaska. We have created three vastly different scenarios from one premise: a DUI accident, a happy family gathering, and a power outage. These seemingly contradictory events actually don't intersect at all. They don't have to. They are all valid conclusions in the field of possibility, not exact mathematical formulas such as the boiling point of water on planet Earth. This is both an advantage and problem of astrology. It is a system that primarily forces you to engage with the variables at play and harness a deeper level of understanding. That primes you to train pattern recognition skills that you can then take elsewhere. However, it also means that you are liable for the interpretation, including any psychological biases or the Barnum effect, of using the symbolism presented at hand to validate your own hunches rather than objectively assess. So, astrology is not a dead set formulaic measure of reality. You're not going to build a rocket to Mars with it. That is not a failure of astrology because that is not the purpose of astrology. Astrology is a temporal framework for you to make sense of your position in this world. It's not going to cure cancer, it's not going to make you $1 billion, and it's certainly not going to be an end all be all tool for you to drop all your common sense. No, astrology is primarily a tool of objective self reflection, of understanding and categorizing the complex cycles at play, to develop a sense of pattern recognition, to better navigate this world. It is not a guarantee, it is a framework of cognition for higher awareness of the way you and your reality is shaped. With that said, the entire science versus astrology discourse is largely a moot point because it so often fails to address what is actually being discussed. Most studies reduce astrology to simple tests of seeing if an astrologer can visually match a chart to a person, but that is a flawed framework. We have to start by separating the tool from the user, for the very simple reason that, let's be frank, a lot of people are bad at pattern recognition. Astrology is also a very easy tool to use for the wrong reason. Many use it as an avenue for simple reassurance, not objective analysis, because that's what they and perhaps their clients often seek. However, that is not an astrology problem, that is a human problem. Furthermore, these studies cannot possibly handle the sheer level of complexity required for a proper astrological analysis. Most studies are reduced to pop cultural astrology that you would see on a Cosmopolitan article, which I will tell you right now is garbage. Sun sign astrology is nowhere near enough. Astrology goes really deep and it gets really complex, which means that there are quadrillions of potential combinations that we are talking about here. And each of these combinations can be used for multiple contexts and perspectives. Remember Alaska. A power outage, a potluck, and the accident are all valid potentials from one set of very simple patterns. If a human incorrectly interprets these patterns, or if an experiment isn't designed to account for this range of potential, that is a human or experimental problem, not a problem of the system itself. Additionally, it's crucial to understand that astrology is a living practice that evolves. It has existed for thousands of years and it has experienced periods of growth and decay, of cultural exchange. The idea that it's a single, static belief system handed down from Babylon is factually incorrect. And yet, astrology is often lumped into this one specific shape that is most often informed by what you see on social media or, again, a cosmopolitan article, which I will tell you right now is complete garbage. So, when a study sets out to tackle astrology, which astrology is it even testing? The ancient Mesopotamian version? Perhaps the medieval one? Or maybe the modern psychological and simplified one. We've got a case where astrology is not formulaically consolidated enough to even be properly assessed. The way a clock can be read depends on context and perspective and can have a countless amount of interpretations that seemingly contradict each other, but depending on the context and perspective, can have a completely valid manifestation, perhaps at once. Quite frankly, science is better served focusing its resources elsewhere. Cancer research, curing autoimmune diseases, and mitigating the effects of climate change. The question is not whether astrology meets the rigid criteria of the scientific method. We've already established that it operates under a different framework. It's not going to provide you the equation for gravity. Astrology is a clock that you can interface with if you so choose. It in no way precludes physics or chemistry. You can be an astrologer, you can love science. In fact, everyone should. The real question is whether astrology can be a useful tool for you. And for that, we have to look beyond flawed experiments and acknowledge the deep seated human need for meaning and pattern. Finally, let's tackle the biggest dismissal, which is the phrase, the stars can't possibly affect your life. First of all, as we have established, that is not the principle that astrology operates on. It tracks the celestial bodies as cycles. But even then, let's unpack one of the strangest statements a person can make. When you say the stars can't possibly affect your life, consider this: the moon governs the ocean tides, the sun is the literal reason we exist, and its cycles influence everything on planet Earth. including something as trivial as wind. Jupiter acts as a cosmic bodyguard, pulling in asteroids that might otherwise hit us. Mars affects the Earth's orbit. Jupiter pulls on Mercury. Every complex element in our body was forged in the heart of a star. The gold we have in our solar system is older than the solar system. The solar system is a system. It is interconnected where all entities affect one another. Nothing is ever isolated. The solar system, in turn, is interconnected within the Milky Way, which in turn is interconnected with the universe at large. Everything is connected. There are countless cycles at play in an ever connected universe, meaning that there are countless interactions, begetting countless correlations. The hard part is figuring out how everything is connected, of course. And astrology is just one possible vantage point for that. Astrology is a language of pattern, a tool for introspection, and the window into the timeless human quest for meaning in the cosmos. And that, in and of itself, is something worth exploring. You absolutely do not have to use astrology to have a great life. It is not a necessary practice. But for those who choose to engage with it, the benefits can be vast. At its most immediate level, it is a powerful tool for self introspection, offering a symbolic language to explore your own life and patterns. It naturally fosters a deep sense of curiosity about the world and your place in it. Beyond the personal, it is a fascinating lens for cultural analysis. You can use it to understand history, to see how ancient and modern civilizations use the sky to make sense of their world, and why so many foundational myths and societal structures are tied to celestial cycles. Astrology goes deep. You can spend your entire life studying it and not even scratch the surface. Ultimately, it's a wonderful exercise for the brain, training it to make new connections and think in terms of cycles and symbols and universal archetypes that you might not have thought of previously. Even if you were to analyze the wrong chart for yourself, you would still benefit from the process simply by asking yourself how these themes and archetypes and symbols show up in your life.